Alright guys, so let's get stuck into this engine and start tearing it down. So first step is we're going to remove all of the ancillaries, so alternator, power steering fluid reservoir, belts, water pump, all that kind of stuff. We want to get it down to effectively just the block and the head. Then we're going to be pulling the valve cover off. We're going to be loosening all of the head bolts, retorquing them. That is in line with BMW's own service bulletin, which describes the procedure to go about when one of these motors does need a head gasket replacement, typically for a blown head gasket. We don't know if that's the case here, but what we do need to know is whether the block is still good. So yeah, of course BMW then says if it's not good, you chuck it away. If you pull any of the bolts out of the head, pull the threads out of the block. Of course, in our case, we'll find an alternative solution. We'll either time cert or we'll go up in size to the S54, I think it is, head bolts. Good. So, be back in a few seconds when we've got this stuff off. Okay. Well, not much to say, as you can see. It's looking a lot more naked than it was about an hour and a half ago. So all the ancillaries have come off: alternator, power steering, pump and reservoir, the oil filter housing. And yeah, then we took off the valve cover, removed the Vanos unit from the front, and have just removed the cams, the cam boxes, as well as the hydraulic lash adjusters. So we're now at the point where we can test for torque. So basically what we're going to be doing now is loosening all the head bolts and then retorquing them for the simple purpose of confirming whether or not this block will actually hold torque. So here we go, see how it goes. Okay guys, so there you have it. So what we've done is we loosened all the head bolts, we retorqued them to BMW spec in line with the service bulletin, and the threads held, nothing pulled out, no aluminium on threads. So that's the first kind of tick in a box. The downside is, and I don't know what to make of this, we can't find anything wrong. We are not seeing what we'd hoped to see, which is some telltale sign which would explain our heating melodies. There's nothing obvious on the head gasket in terms of a blow. So yeah, I guess we'll have a closer look at this. But yeah, in general, if you want to have a little peek in here, the inside of this motor really doesn't look bad at all. There's minimal carbon, really not a lot of crusty. It's a little bit bad on 6, maybe 3's a little bit higher, but really not terrible at all. 5 is the cylinder which ate our desub pin, and you can see the damage on the top of the piston on the intake side. And we'll show you in a second that we can see that on the head as well. It's knocked the inside of the head. But miraculously missed the valve. So the inside of cylinder 5 looks remarkably good given the abuse that it's seen. So we're not seeing any clogs in the water jacket. We're not seeing anything really. It's, there's no clues at the moment. The only thing we did experience was when we removed the head bolts. The bolts in these two holes here were very oily. And dark in color. The others were this beautiful light gray color, so clearly had never been in contact with anything. But these two here were completely oil soaked and even had some mucky sludge on them. So we did not retorque these two, simply because I didn't want to run the risk of having a hydraulic lock in there and pulling the threads because the bolts were locked up against oil in the bottom of the holes. But we screwed them back down in and everything else is fine. So I don't know why that would happen. We'll try and understand what that's about. We're also trying to understand why the head gasket has these small circular water channels from cylinders 2 to 4, and then in 1 and 6 it's got the big ovals. If you have a look underneath the head gasket, the water channels are all the big ovals. So if we look at the head gasket, it's stamped 25, 28 or 2.5, 2.8. So we immediately got a little bit alarmed and thought, hold on a second, are our claims about this being a never being opened engine wrong? And did the original owner maybe have the head off at some point? But as it happens, we have a head gasket here, a brand new one, which has exactly the same pattern. So if we compare that, we've got precisely the same pattern. By the way, we're not going to use this gasket. This came out of a cheap engine set. Not prepared to take a chance on a head gasket. But yeah, it's got exactly the same markings, 2.5, 2.8, and the same holes. Surprisingly, and this was definitely from a 3-litre or M54B30 engine. So let's go and have a look at this head. So firstly, just on the cam side, the intake cam really looks great, and as do the valve, all the cam boxes, and the bearings look fine. On the exhaust cam side, there's a score mark in the middle of the journal, so not like your oil line hole on the first journal at the front. But there's actually a very nasty score on the second, and third is a light score, but you can see it. Fourth is 2 light scores. The fifth has got 2 light scores, or actually quite two heavy scores. And then we can see it on these journals here. So this is characteristic of, I guess, is some unfiltered foreign particle being injected through the oil injection port, or the hole here, picking up and getting dragged through. And that's a real pity. So we'll get some advice in terms of whether this is still considered serviceable. We'll take it from there. And on the head itself, it's got a fair amount of varnish, but I must say, compared to some pictures and videos we've seen of stuff coming out of other cars, really not bad at all. This will clean up fine. But let's have a look at cylinder 5 on the underside here. And what we can see here is this very heavy impact damage on the edges here, but somehow maybe it caught the valve a tad there. This is absolutely bizarre how this survived that DISA pin. Initially lost compression completely in the cylinder and then somehow healed itself. So it was obviously just some kind of small amount of material here, probably preventing that valve from seating properly initially, and it eventually seated itself. But yeah, valves look like they're in half decent condition. So once we get it all out and cleaned up, we'll start to make a call. I'd like to inspect this head a little bit more closely. Probably have to have it pressure tested professionally anyway, because we really need to find something now. We cannot just go and put this thing back together and somehow hope that it's better or that we've solved the problem. Cool. All right, guys, so that's enough for one night, and we'll keep you informed of what we find next.